Anyway, it's nice to be with you this afternoon, and we're looking forward to your talk this evening.
I'm delighted to be here, thank you.
Good. So I guess the main question I want to ask is, you've been a college president for 23 years, and you were a professor before that, and now you're a professor again.
Right.
So you've probably seen a lot in those years.
And
So let us go back 23 years and have you reflect a little on how being a college president and the challenges that college presidents have changed since you started as president of Wellesley.
wow, it would have to be more than 23 years because I've been away from Duke for almost 10. So that would have been 1981, which was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
How has leadership and higher education changed since then? So many ways, but I guess the first one that comes to mind for me is technology.
Mm-hmm.
And the second would be globalization, because the challenges that we now face with online education, both the advantages and the concerns that that brings, were absolutely not on the radar screen at all 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a sea change because it's so big now. But globalization is also a bigger issue. Now, it's not as though nobody ever studied abroad in 1981, but there was not at all the sense that a self-respecting university would be not only admitting some reasonable number of foreign students, quote unquote, which was many, many, many fewer then, but also that part of a good liberal arts and a good professional education was getting to know the world in the broader sense. Almost certainly study abroad, having professors from other universities come to yours here in America and having yours go elsewhere, and having speakers and themes and programs that broaden the horizons of everyone there in the global sense. It's essential now, but it would have not been as central to any college and few universities in 1981.
Mm-hmm. And of course you've been at two very different schools too. I mean, working at Wellesley and working at Duke. What do you think is the difference between being president of a women's university and a men's university?
You know, it's funny. The first thing that struck me when I got to Duke wasn't the difference of coeducation and being a women's college, because I had taught at Stanford. I had 3 sons. I mean, it wasn't as like I'd spent all my life only among women. But the things that struck me, and then I'll answer your question as you asked it. First of all, having 9 schools instead of just 1. At Wellesley, there was plenty of disagreement, and people had all kinds of different ideas about what Wellesley should do, but we were all on the same boat. At Duke, there were 9 schools, each with a significant degree of not autonomy, but independence, control of resources, its own mission, and a dean who had a good deal of power. And so I had, for the first time reporting to me, people with an independent power base and a somewhat different mission. And learning how to manage that was the biggest difference. I remember that someone once said that Duke was like a big battleship that's hard to turn around. It's not a battleship, it's a flotilla. And being admiral of a flotilla, where you got all these boats, large and small, each of whom may go off in some direction like a scattering sheep, and you're supposed to keep them together. That was the first and most significant difference. The second was athletics, even though athletics we thought had been very important at Wellesley, and we were very proud of our athletics. Nonetheless, Duke basketball particularly was a different world. And I had to learn how important it was to think about university athletics, Division I, top of the match, both the strengths and the challenges thereof. I was lucky enough that Mike Krzyzewski got it about what it meant to be at a university, but he was a very powerful, very visible coach, and not only basketball, but all of it. The third was the medical school. You've probably heard the jokes about the Ivy League presidents all sitting around and the only one smiling is the president of Princeton. Why is that? She doesn't have a medical center. Well, I discovered quite quickly that medical schools, however wonderful they are, and they are, and at Duke it was one of the most prestigious, if not the most prestigious parts of the university. But everybody in the medical school felt that only they understood their business. Doctors historically do that. They think
Yeah.
if you're not a doctor, you don't really understand. Well, here I was, not only not a doctor, but not a Dookie by background. So those three were the big challenges. As far as coeducation, I have always felt that the ideal one is a world in which there is true coeducation. And I felt that Duke measured up to that standard in some ways, not as many as I would wish. So part of my goal was to say, how can we bring, for women at Duke, some of the strengths of a women's college, even within a university? And I think in many ways you've done that splendidly here at the University of Richmond.
But what do you mean by real coeducation? I mean, what is
What
that
I mean by
about?
real coeducation is that women feel as entitled, as much they belong there with all the resources available to them as men. And I think about how long it took Princeton to approach that goal, because when Princeton first admitted women in 1969, there was only one woman faculty member and very few graduate students who'd just been around for a few years. It was such a male place.
Yeah.
And it could not have become truly coeducational overnight. It was a process of decades, and we're still working on it, much closer than we were then. But truly coeducational, where there's not still a sense, well, there's certain places here which still are intentionally or not felt to be male bastions.
Now, when you were at Wellesley, were the other administrators mainly women?
They were both.
They were both.
And that had been a change, because when Wellesley was founded in 1860-something, unlike the other women's colleges, our founder, who was an ardent male feminist, said, women can do the work, I give them a chance. So everybody at Wellesley in the early years was female, except the janitor and the music professor. So Wellesley has never had a male president, and Wellesley for a long time had only female administrators. Well, that changed. Now we have male faculty and administrators almost in equal numbers with female. But it's always been a place with strong women's leadership.
But switching gears a little, so what do you see as the biggest challenges facing leadership in higher education today? And what makes you happy that you're not a college president anymore?
Whoa, boy. I was thinking, I'm serving on the board of I'm serving on the Harvard Corporation, the president and fellows, which is a fascinating assignment. And Larry Bacow, the former president of Tufts, is also on the corporation. And Drew was grappling recently with some issues that have resulted from this cheating scandal that we've been grappling with all year, and some other things that have come across her desk, as is always the case in April. Ask any university president about April being the cruelest month, and he'll say, Elliot knew exactly what he was talking about. But both Larry and I were saying, I'm really glad I'm not a college president anymore, because we don't have to deal with it. So it's issues like that, a cheating scandal, although you certainly don't get those every day. Certainly Harvard hasn't. But also the 2 points that I mentioned earlier, technology and globalization. The questions about how you will protect what's worth preserving about a residential liberal arts-based university at a time when people are more and more experimenting with and finding fascinating ways to teach almost everything online, including your own faculty. That to me is one of the most significant challenges. And I think we've got a number of ways to get it right in terms of the balance, faculty loyalties and where they may migrate, and business models, and the ways in which faculty and students choose to spend their time. But it's going to be a big challenge. That plus globalization, do you start a campus abroad?
Yeah.
What does it mean to have a campus abroad?
Right.
What are the challenges thereof? And if you don't, are you being way behind the times? Harvard and Princeton both have decided not to have campuses abroad after long consideration. But that puts us a little bit out of step with many of our peers. Personally, I think it is the right decision, at least for the two of us. But a lot of people are finding that it's exciting to have campuses abroad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think both of those issues speak to the question of sort of quality control.
They do. That's a very good point.
And the values of liberal arts education.
and trying to preach the values of liberal arts education, as all of us know.
Yeah.
In order to be a college president, you can be very much as you are,
Right.
managing a crucial program for this. I think that's a challenge today as well, because there's so many people who are saying an education should be judged by its utility, by the kind of job you get, how much money you make afterward. We know well that that is certainly only one, and probably not the most important measure, and the quality of person that you become and the depth of your life. I gave a talk at Stanford last fall to a program on education as self-fashioning for freshmen, and helping them think through what is deliberate about their education and their self-fashioning in their first year was a wonderful experience.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much for coming to the University of Richmond.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.